quiet. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming to the White House for your daily briefing. Before I take questions, let me read a brief announcement. On Wednesday, February 29th, President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama will host a dinner at the White House to honor our armed forces who served in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation New Dawn, and to honor their families. This dinner, an expression of the nation's gratitude for the achievements and enormous sacrifices of the brave Americans who served in the Iraq War and of the families who supported them, will include men and women in uniform from all ranks, services, states, and backgrounds, representative of the many thousands of Americans who served in Iraq. The White House has been working with military and civilian leaders from the Department of Defense on this tribute, and we will release more details regarding the dinner when they become available.
Describing this as a state dinner fair?
I'm sorry?
Is that a fair description, the sort of shorthand of saying a state dinner style?
No, I think it's unique to the kind of dinner it is. A state dinner has to do with heads of government, heads of state, right?
Is it fair to similar
Won't be
formality?
fancy like that.
Is it buffet?
Yeah. Buffet. But I mean, using that shorthand, incorrect or correct?
I think state dinner probably is not quite accurate, and we'll have more details to describe it for you. It's really focused on the men and women who served in Iraq and in all stations within the armed services. So I think one distinction might be that state dinners are about the elevated and important guests that we have visiting from other countries, and these would be for all those who served in Iraq. Yes, this is Iraq. I don't have the number on it, but February 29th. I don't have that either. I think the folks in uniform tend to wear their uniforms, but I don't have any dress or menu or entertainment. So, with that, I'll take questions, Ben, or I'll take more questions.
Thanks.
Rather.
Jay, questions on Iran and Syria. First on Iran, is what the president did today on broader sanctions and also the prospect of more sanctions this spring an indication that the White House is at all worried that Israel will act on its own on a military front before these sanctions have a chance to kick in?
No, I think that it is reflective of the policy that we've taken for quite a long time now in reaction to Iranian behavior, which is essentially a dual track where we continue to have an offer to the Iranians that if they get serious about their international obligations, if they respond to the letter from Lady Ashton about starting negotiations with the P5+1, if they agree to give up their nuclear weapons ambitions, then there is an option for them to rejoin the international community. Meanwhile, because they haven't done that, and they've so far refused to do that, and they continue to pursue a course that is dangerous, we will ramp up the effort to isolate and pressure the regime, working with our international allies. I think the President addressed the question regarding Israel during his interview with Matt Lauer over the weekend.
Right, but I mean, given that the development has happened today, or we learned about it today, about the additional sanctions.
I can assure you that, remember, Ben, that we have been, there has been a steady increase in our sanctions activity, and this is part of that escalation, and it's not related to, specifically to that issue or the questions about it.
That issue about Israel, the Israeli.
Correct.
On Syria, I think since we last saw you, the UN Security Council rejected the peace plan supported by the United States, pushed hard for by the United States. Violence has continued. Obviously, we have the closing of the embassy. And the President said in the NBC interview that he thinks that the noose is tightening on the Assad regime. I'm just wondering, what is that based upon? It seems to a lot of outsiders that Assad is operating freely.
Well, there's no question that he is operating with gross disregard for the health and safety and welfare of his own people. He is killing his own people. And as we witness this, it only reinforces the need for the international community to act, and reinforces the disappointment we have with members of the United Nations Security Council who did not vote with the rest of the international community in favor of the anti-Syria resolution, the anti-Syrian regime resolution. The fact of the matter is that the pressure on Assad continues to intensify. He has dwindling financial resources. He has dwindling access to what he needs to continue to govern. His regime has lost control of parts of the country. There are a number of indications of the desire to depart from the regime by senior Syrian government and military officials. These are telltale signs that Assad's future is very limited at best. And we continue to work with the international community to do everything we can to enhance the pressure on him, to make it clear to everyone that they should not want to place a bet on the Assad regime, because that is a losing bet. And it is a losing bet in pure realpolitik terms, but it's also a losing bet, obviously, in terms of being on the right side of the people of Syria.
One last one on this. Given that killing that you described, is the President personally frustrated with those who block the international effort, particularly China and Russia?
Well, I think that what I just said reflects our view, which is that those who voted against the resolution need to realize that betting everything on Assad is a recipe for failure, not just for the interests of those countries, but for the stability of the region and for Syria's future. What we've seen, the video that we've seen just most recently coming out of Syria, demonstrates the appalling actions of the government forces. And you have a great number of countries, and obviously the United States, Europe, and Arab countries who see this for what it is. And we will continue to work with our international partners to make that case. Yeah. I'll get back to you.
China was part of the double veto that was cast in the Security Council against the Syria resolution. And of course, this is a little over 1 week before Chinese Vice President Xi visits Washington. What, if anything, will President Obama have to say to Vice President about this subject when they meet in the
Well, I don't have an agenda in terms of the discussions for those meetings. I think that we've made clear our disappointment that those votes were cast. There's obviously a range of issues to be discussed in our bilateral relationship with China that will be discussed during that visit.
Could this have any impact on relations with either China or Russia?
Well, I think, again, this is about what the international community's response to Syrian action should be. There has been a great deal of collective action taken against the Syrian regime thus far. There will be greater action taken, and we're going to work with all the friends of Syria and the Syrian people to continue to pressure the Assad regime to continue to make clear that Assad's days are numbered. I think that we will also obviously continue to work with the Chinese and the Russians on a host of other issues, even as we press this point, obviously.
Secretary Clinton did call on but as you mentioned, the Friends of Syrian Democracy to band together to help the Syrian opposition, the political opposition. Is there any thought being given to giving assistance, military assistance, to the rebels that are fighting Assad?
We believe that the right solution in Syria is a political solution, and there remains an opportunity for that to be achieved, for that transition to democracy to take place. That's why we felt, and we continue to feel, it's so important for the international community to act in the way that a Security Council resolution would have embodied, and we'll continue to to work with our international partners in this regard, because the best solution here is a political solution. Broadly speaking, we take no options off the table, but our focus is on using our diplomatic, economic, and other means to help bring about and usher in a democratic transition.
I'll talk about Egypt.
Sure.
Do we know how many Americans are actually in Egypt of those named in the judge's order?
Bill, I don't want to get into specifics about the order. We're deeply disturbed by the crackdown against NGOs in Egypt, including the filing of charges against Americans. Groups like the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, and many others, both American and Egyptian, have done nothing wrong. Their only assignment is to support Egypt in its transition to democracy. These groups and individuals associated with them do not fund political parties or individual candidates. Many of these groups have worked in Egypt for several years, and so their activities are not new. Moreover, they also served as observers for the recent parliamentary elections at the request of the government of Egypt. Now, we continue to communicate at all levels with the Egyptian government our grave concerns regarding the crackdown against NGOs in Europe. We have underscored how serious a problem these actions are. We have said clearly that these actions could have consequences for our relationship, including regarding our assistance programs. So we'll continue to work with the Egyptians.
What would it take to trigger a cutoff of the $1.5 billion in U.S.
Well, I don't want to
aid?
speculate about what that would be. We've made clear that we take this very seriously, that it could have consequences. These actions could have consequences for our relationship and including our assistance programs, but I don't want to speculate about what actions might precipitate a response on our part along those lines, except to say that we take this very seriously, that it's important to remember that these institutions have been over there for a number of years. They're all over the country promoting democracy, and that the individuals here have done nothing wrong.
Some of the people who are named are actually in the United States, some of the U.S. citizens, but some obviously are over there, and we know that some are in the embassy. Do you have any idea how many?
You know, Bill, I don't want to get into specific numbers or names. There are some Americans who have opted to stay in the embassy compound in Cairo while waiting for permission to depart Egypt. I just don't feel that it's wise to get into more details on that.
So at what level are the discussions about these people continuing?
I think at every level, and very high levels. You know that the President spoke with General Tantawi a number of days ago. And discussions from that level on down continue because we take this issue very seriously.
But he hasn't spoken to any of the top leadership.
I don't have any new communications involving the President to read out to you now, but you can be sure that we are engaging with the Egyptian government on this issue at every level. Sure.
Can we stay in the same, since we're stay in the region again? So yesterday in the interview with Matt, the President said,
He's Matt to you. He means Matt Lauer.
okay. So we were just having a nice conversation here. Mr. Carney, the interview with Mr. Lauer. The President seemed to I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like the President was contradicting the intelligence report that the folks gave to Capitol Hill earlier in the week about this idea that Iran's looking for a way to attack the United States, which came out in that intelligence briefing to Congress. And the President seemed to say that wasn't the case. So it just sounded like a contradiction as far as the intelligence community was concerned.
You know I'm not going to get into with any detailed discussions of intelligence regarding Iran or anywhere else from here. The President made clear that, and I will just refer you to his comments about what he assesses and we assess their current intentions and capabilities to be. That doesn't mean that we don't hear from a variety of channels, including very public ones, the negative intentions of certain Iranian leaders towards the United States